Welcome to Chapter 18, Conservation of Biodiversity, Video 2. This is Ms. Thewison. There are certain characteristics that make a species more prone to extinction than other species. In Chapter 6, we will go over case-selected species. But most of the characteristics of species more prone to extinction are those of case-selected species. If a species is found in a small range like an island, it is more vulnerable to habitat degradation or invasive species. Large organisms like elephants or top predators like lions require larger habitats, so they are vulnerable to habitat degradation. Species that reproduce slowly are very slow to recover from losses. Blue whales have only one calf every 3 years, and even though it has been a long time since we started hunting them, their numbers are still not recovered. Species that reproduce in specialized areas, like the spotted owl who only nests in very old trees, are at greater risk because most of those trees have been removed by logging. Species like panda or koala who have specialized diets and are also at greater risk of becoming endangered. A species that has a greater value to humans will be at greater risk due to overharvesting, such as sharks for shark fin soup or bluefin tuna for sushi. Or a species we fear, like wolves, alligators, or mountain lions, or that may threaten our livestock, like wolves, are more likely to be hunted or removed by humans. Legislation is one way that we are attempting to save these species. We are going to go through each of the pieces of legislation on the list. Please be aware that some are federal while others are international. You need to be aware of federal and international efforts to save species. The Lacey Act was the first piece of legislation in the United States that was put in place to protect species. It made it illegal to transport animals across state lines, which made it against the law to kill an animal in one state and sell it in another. This helped to reduce the poaching and overharvesting in the United States. The Endangered Species Act is a federal law that protects endangered species. If a species is listed as endangered, it is then protected from harm, harassment, hunting, shooting, killing, capture, and collection. The Endangered Species Act is enforced by the Fish and Wildlife Service and has been successful in protecting a number of endangered species. The Endangered Species Act also makes it illegal to import or trade any endangered species in the world. Be very careful when traveling that elephant stool you bought in Africa cannot be brought into the United States legally. And just to clarify, it is a real elephant's foot and the elephant was killed to remove it. Yes, they actually really make those things. As part of the Endangered Species Act, there is also a recovery plan for each endangered species. These plans are very expensive and often focus more on the charismatic species rather than those that may need it more. So would you rather have help save the Florida panther or the Atwater prairie chicken? Ultimately, we usually pick the more interesting things like Florida panther. Ultimately, the Endangered Species Act expired in 1992, but has continued to be enforced due to the great deal of support by scientists and the public. The Marine Mammal Protection Act is a federal law here in the United States that protects all endangered and threatened marine mammals. It is enforced by the National Marine Fisheries Service. It makes it illegal to touch, harass, harm, injure, or kill marine mammals. Most marine mammals are listed as threatened or endangered, so it is best to assume all are protected and act accordingly. The Sustainable Fisheries Act is a federal law established in 1996 to manage our fisheries. The Sustainable Fisheries Act puts limits on the amount of fish that can be caught in an attempt to maintain our fisheries for the future. CITES stands for the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. This is an international law. It bans the hunting, capture, and selling of endangered and threatened species. The issue with international law is that there is no international police to enforce it, and only countries that agree are expected to participate. So each country has to be willing to enforce CITES, and not all countries have the ability or desire to do so. CITES lists species based on their risk of extinction. Appendix 1 species are more heavily regulated than Appendix 2 or 3. Convention of Biological Diversity is another international law that was established to conserve biodiversity and to make sure any use of biodiversity is sustainable. It also makes sure that countries benefit from their biodiversity, such as pharmaceutical companies from the United States cannot go into Brazilian rainforest and find a new medication and not share those benefits with the Brazilian government. The Red List is a list of threatened species kept by the IUCN. The IUCN works to maintain this list so that countries have information on how to regulate their species. In order to save most species, regulation is not enough. There are basically two approaches to save a species. One is a species survival plan. It is a plan that uses captive breeding to increase the numbers of a species, and then the species can be reintroduced into their original range. However, habitat must be saved for the reintroduction, and the original reason for the species decline must be addressed so that it does not occur again. An example of the success of a species survival plan would be the Arabian oryx. The Arabian oryx was hunted till there was only 9 left in the wild. Those 9 were taken from the Arabian Peninsula to the Phoenix Zoo in Arizona. They were bred and sent out to other zoos till there were hundreds in captivity in the United States. Then individuals were selected and sent back to the Arabian Peninsula. The reintroduced animals have been successfully breeding, and their numbers are now in the 300 range at the last time I heard. One of the females I worked with at one of the zoos I worked at was sent back to the Arabian Peninsula, and about a year later we were notified that she was doing well and had even had a calf in the wild. It was very exciting to know that we had succeeded to reintroduce the Arabian oryx back into its original range. For several years, I worked as a species survival plan coordinator for Adragazelle and Moorgazelle. The other approach is to preserve the ecosystem. This approach saves numerous species, but can be difficult and expensive. If we are to protect ecosystems, we need to take several things into consideration. All areas have an edge effect. The edge effect is a zone around the edge of the area that is not as useful to organisms. Each species has a different size edge effect. For example, raccoons really do not have an edge effect, whereas many species, another species may not come within 100 meters of the edge. The edge can have human interaction, it can have more sunlight, it can be drier and warmer than the middle of the forest. So there's a lot of reasons that it is lower in quality and animals will not use it. Okay, the larger the edge effect, the smaller the habitat is for the species. Given the picture in the slide, it looks as though a large area is being protected, but if we allow the transition area to be used by humans, then for some species, the only space that they really will use would be the core area. So in fact, they have very little area. The shape of the area is also important. If the protected habitat is long and narrow, then most of the area is going to be lost due to edge effect, and there may not be much habitat, if any, left. This will wrap up video 2 and the end of chapter 18. If you have any questions about anything in this video or chapter 18, please let me know so I can go over that information in class. And have a nice day.